Hello, everyone, and welcome to The History of the Fourth Era, Episode 1, An Introduction. My name is Zach, and I'll be your host as we explore the political and cultural atmosphere of Tamriel in the years following the Oblivion Crisis, leading up to the events of Skyrim. With me is a suite of other writers and thinkers who have helped shape this narrative and our philosophy of how to approach these topics. Each episode will explore the provinces and their happenings, starting from the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis and moving forwards. This episode today is going to be a bit on the shorter side, as I'm just going to be walking through the basics of this podcast and what future episodes will entail. Normally, we're going to aim for 20 to 30 minute episodes so as to not overwhelm listeners off the start. As time goes on, and if people request it, however, I'm certainly not opposed to making longer episodes. The point of this podcast is to fill a lot of empty spaces in Tamriel's history in a time where these events are incredibly relevant and shape the current circumstances that we see in Skyrim. On its own, this block of time with little information isn't entirely new to the Elder Scrolls universe. After all, we have nearly 1,000 years in the First Era in which we have almost no information. This is of course due to a dragon break, itself being a pretty weird event and not really obeying the laws of time, but it shows us that, despite the entire game series taking place within the span of 1,000 years, from the Plane Meld to the return of Alduin, efforts have been made to flesh out history beyond the time period that the games take place in. It builds context, it builds complexity. One of the main reasons I wanted to start this series was because I love the idea of the community having input on the creation of the Elder Scrolls story. It all really stemmed from an interest in the works of Michael Kirkbride. That's right. How far did you think we were going to get into an Elder Scrolls lore podcast without mentioning Michael Kirkbride? For those of you that don't know him, he was a former writer for Bethesda Softworks, his most seminal work most certainly being Morrowind. He wrote the 36 Lessons of Vivec as well as the foundation books for the world's mythology. He was also asked to write some later stuff for Oblivion like the Mysterium Zarces, and even was a general consultant for Skyrim. You can tell he has a lot of passion for creative writing, and he has a very refined process for creating lore. He said it best in an AMA on Reddit from a while back, and I quote, "Tell God's story, then the farmer's story, then listen to what the dog has to say." It shows a comprehensive approach to creating the events of a world and how its residents might interpret him. The point of this whole tangent is that, alongside these great works, he has continued to influence the Elder Scrolls community outside of his official tenure at Bethesda. He regularly writes for the Imperial Library, a great source for both mundane and far-out lore in the series, and even wrote Coda, a novel set in a futuristic apocalyptic Nirn, and basically posits that the Elder Scrolls world is a collaborative effort, meaning that canon is therefore subjective. This subjectivity is a double-edged sword, however. What do you do if there are contradicting aspects of it? If anything can be true, how do you put stock in what you think is most important? I think we as a community do that by collectively interpreting these works and seeing their context and tangibility in future games. Why emphasis on the future games part? Because these are the vehicles that we use to explore the world. I don't really care about the crazy metaphysics of Kime if I don't get to play a game where those things matter. They're such a powerful phenomenon that they most likely would never exist in a game, at least for the player to use. The very fact that people try to correlate Kime with console commands and mods shows that it's a thing that we'd never see organically in a game that we'd get to use. The other big inspiration I had when I started this project was the Utak mythos. It still stands, in my opinion, and probably of most other people as well, as the most comprehensive lore project by fans of the Elder Scrolls. Ice Fire Warden has done a fantastic job of curating not only a story, but a community as well. Its lore balances both the profound and the mundane, and it creates new ideas while respecting the sources that it draws inspiration and context from. The fact, even if not official yet, that ESO draws inspirations about Ineslia from the Utak mythos shows the potential tangibility that projects like this can have. I think part of the project's ability to have that influence is the fact that it doesn't step on anyone's toes. After all, what lore is there about Ineslia? It was a piece of land that was conquered during the invasion of Okiir by Uriel V a couple hundred years ago, and that's it. If someone wants to start talking about some bad elves that live there, who does it harm in doing so? When these projects gain momentum, they also become a useful resource. If in some future update in ESO you can purchase pets and trinkets from other parts of the world, why not include some weird critters from Ineslia or some Ekmer jewelry? Non-controversial apocrypha like this is the easiest way for the Elder Scrolls community to give life to ideas that come from outside the game studios. When there's no information about a particular topic, why not accept this new information? If it doesn't compromise the official canon and seems thoroughly researched, what's to lose? There's power in the ability of the community to come together around an idea and accept it as canon. I believe that it's the biggest way that we can help shape what we might see in future games, honestly. Tapping into this creative drive, I think there are two ways to go about it. The first way is to develop lore for an idea that's distanced from the events of Tamriel. The Utak mythos does this masterfully, yet it doesn't feel too distant either. This isn't lore from a different Kalpa or 6 years in the future. The second way to go about it is to develop lore between the gaps and cracks of Tamriel's history. This is where we step in. The purpose of this podcast series is to navigate the line between freedom of lore subjectivity and a realistic, tangible, and thorough approach in doing so. We're a diverse team of writers who are interested in tons of different aspects of Tamriel. Our individual interests in a particular thing are combined into an overarching framework to look at the Fourth Era history. In each episode, we'll try to focus on one particular province, but will include relevant events happening in other parts of Tamriel. After all, history is a series of interconnected events. What happens in the depths of Black Marsh can influence whether an emperor in Cyrodiil lives or dies. Our main focus is the history of the Empire after the Oblivion Crisis, and we will progress chronologically as its story unfolds, but we will frequently dedicate episodes to catching up with the rest of Tamriel. As time goes on, we'll expand the series out to new media outlets, but this will take some time. I'm kind of a Luddite after all, so I'll have to overcome my reluctance or hope someone else is more enthusiastic to get the ball rolling on that. So join us in 2 weeks as we explore Tamriel in the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis. The first 5 years after the Oblivion Crisis will be a period of chaos and anarchy that is a harbinger for what is to come during the Stormcrown Interregnum in 4E10. How were the other provinces affected by the Oblivion Crisis? In what sort of state was the imperial bureaucracy and military before and after it? How does a literal apocalypse change the way people think about their leaders and their government? And in a world where everything's in ruins, who gets top priority? We'll see how, in the chaos which comes after Mehrunes Dagon's invasion, the seeds are sown for the Empire's fission. The southern counties in Cyrodiil are poised for secession, giving rise to the Empire of Nibene, an ethno-nationalist state hell-bent on suppressing the Beast Folk. It's going to be a tough mission, however, considering that they're sandwiched between Elsewire and Blackmarsh. We'll also see where the army's loyalties lie when the central authority is no longer able to pay them. Is it with the disconnected elite of the Imperial City? Or is it with local commanders who might be exploiting the local residents a bit too much? The rise of the field armies as some of the most intact units left after the Oblivion Crisis sets the stage for their increased involvement in county politics, particularly in Calovia. Lastly, we'll see how the collapse of imperial authority in southern Tamriel helps give birth to its future powerful adversaries, the Thalmor and the Anzalil. Although the ways their movements start and escalate are quite different, they're both rooted in the same premise. The locals rise up against an exploitative empire whose grip on power loosens just enough that everything falls apart. I'm excited to get further into the details with you all. For now, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the idea of this podcast, please like and subscribe, and you'll be the first to see when new episodes come out. Have a great rest of your day. Our background image for this episode was made by Okiir on DeviantArt. That's O-K-I-I-R. They have a lot more cool flag concepts for the Elder Scrolls universe, and I would definitely recommend checking them out and supporting them if you can. Our intro song is Jeremy Soule's King and Country from the Oblivion soundtrack, and our outro is Around the Fire from the Skyrim soundtrack. Links are available in the descriptions below.